Hey, I'm James Mulvaney. I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, and in this time I've launched around half a dozen different companies. Some have been very successful and others not so successful, but that's the journey of being an entrepreneur. Now in this time, as I mentioned, I've launched multiple companies. Some have been 6 and 7-figure businesses, and I wanted to create a video to talk about my approach to generating wealth. Hence the title of this video, Your First Million. Now, I want to be very careful about talking about this and explain from the get-go. This is not coming across from like an arrogant perspective. I'm not trying to encourage like the concept of here's how you can get rich or here's how you can get rich quick, because I see videos like this all the time around the internet. They don't do any good for anyone, and a lot of the time people who are creating those videos are making money by selling information on how to make money, and that's how they've made their money. I, on the other hand, I've never done that. I've never sold any kind of information on making money online or how to be an amazing entrepreneur or how to, get rich in 30 days. So what I wanted to do today is talk very candidly about my journey as an entrepreneur and how I've achieved success, also how I've had some failures along the way, and hopefully give you some inspiration, some ideas of how you can replicate that success in your business for 2021. So if that all sounds good, let's dive into today's video. Here is how to make your first million. So if you are new to this channel, then I'd love you to hit that subscribe button. If you like content like this, I'm always creating videos about entrepreneurship, plus also podcasting and radio, and those are my kind of things. And also I'd appreciate if you give me a thumbs up at the end of this video if you've enjoyed the content. So let's get into the content. Now, when it comes to making your first million, I've kind of split this into 4 key concepts or pillars or principles or whatever you want to call them, which are firstly, adopting the right mindset. I think this is the most important of them all. If you get your mindset right from the get-go, it really, really helps you when it comes to being positive, and it just gives you clarity at the times you sometimes need it. Next is income. Obviously you have to have some kind of income to sustain your life, and plus also generate some kind of revenue and wealth and go beyond just making a living. So I want to talk about that next. Then we're moving into savings. It's just as simple as not spending everything you make. And a lot of business owners I've seen who have suddenly done really well, they've spent everything they've earned, and that can set you up in such a dangerous position, not only from a tax perspective, but also it means that you're not really kind of building any kind of momentum, not really building wealth. You're just going out and splashing it on fast cars or bottles of champagne. You've got to be really careful when you start making money to actually control where that money is being used and how you're going to be using it, which brings me on to the final step, which is acquiring and creating assets. Now, asset is simply something that you own which generates revenue. That could be a property, it could be a business, it could be an investment such as stocks and shares, or it might be in something more tangible like gold, or it could be in one of these newfangled things like Bitcoin. Interestingly, I have investments across all of these different things, which I'm going to get into in a bit. But you have to be able to use that money that you're saving to then turn into assets which will generate a further stream of revenue for you. And then I also want to break down how to actually make 1 million. Like if you're selling a product or a service, how do we actually get one product which maybe is valued at say $100 and turn that into $1 million? So I'm going to do a little bit of math. We're going to use the computer to do that, as it's all prepared on a presentation, because as you know, doing math on camera is never a good idea. All right, so let's start off with mindset. When I look back at the start of my career as an entrepreneur, I was 16 years old. I just finished high school and I had the whole summer ahead of me. And now I remember actually waiting for my 16th birthday, which is at the end of May, because I had to be 16 in order to get a PayPal account. This was back in 2003, okay? So back in 2003, the internet was still pretty young. We didn't have things like Facebook and YouTube then. So I wasn't one of these kids running around making these stupid videos. But I was like, okay, I want to make money online. How can I do that? The years leading up to that, I kind of learned how to build websites. I had learned how to use Photoshop. So really, to begin with, I was just buying and selling my time, my services, to create logos for people. I used to design those little flashing banners. You remember them that used to hang around the internet? They'd be like flashing away in the corner of your thing. I'd be creating those adverts for people for a cost, obviously. And that was literally my foray into how to make money online. And I think at such an early age, once I saw that all I needed was this thing, a computer, and believe it or not, that computer didn't look anything as fancy as this now. It was just like some big old computer that you have in your parents' house when you're a kid. And I was like, wow, all I need is this thing and I can actually generate money. This was a kind of a stage where a lot of my friends were then going out and getting jobs, like working in McDonald's or doing a paper round or working in Subway or whatever it might be. And there's nothing wrong with having a job like that. But I was very conscious and aware, and I had the mindset from a very young age that I was going to make money. I was going to go out there and work, and I was going to make that money for myself rather than actually relying on someone else to kind of pay me at the end of the month. So I think to begin with, you have to take responsibility and really understand that mindset of being responsible for your own destiny, if that makes sense. And as kind of cheesy as that sounds, and I know it's sort of almost kind of like sounds a bit new agey, that sort of thing, like being in control of your destiny. But really, as an entrepreneur, you are 100% responsible for your revenue. You're also 100% responsible for lots of other things, paying tax, making sure that your employees are paid every month, organizing offices, making the business work, generating revenue, making sure that your sales targets are, it's a hugely encompassing thing. And when I was sort of 16, I thought, right, okay, I realized pretty early on that I could only design so many banners in a day. I could only do so many logos or knock together so many websites. So from that, I was kind of like, right, where do I go next? I need a business. I need a product that I can sell. Back then, it was really hot to have reseller hosting, web hosting accounts. You could buy a reseller account. It was really cheap, and you could effectively establish your own web hosting business. So that was my first attempt at running a business, and I very quickly failed. Now, they always talk about failure. If you read lots of entrepreneurship books and listen to some of the world's best entrepreneurs, they will always say failing is a good thing. As long as you learn your lessons and you don't repeat those mistakes, failing fast can actually be incredibly useful. So that's exactly what I did. I thought, I'm going to start a web hosting company. There's loads of people doing this. It's easy, it's cheap to get to market. And I kind of sold like 2 accounts or something. And I realized really quickly that the reason this was is because, number one, I didn't have any budget to promote the thing. I really had no idea what I was doing in terms of online marketing. And also there was like a gazillion competitors springing up every day because it was such an easy product to start selling. And there was really very little value in it because there were so many companies competing against each other. It was just driving the prices down and down and down. So actually making a profit was quite tricky. So I sort of, at that point, I sort of got myself together and thought, okay, maybe this is not going to be a business that I wanted it to be. It's going to be very difficult to make it profitable and really make it kind of generate the sort of level of income that I expected. So I thought, okay, what do we do next? And at the time I was involved in radio. So I was starting to go out and DJ on radio stations and work behind the scenes on radio stations. And I was really interested in that process, the idea of being able to broadcast. So I thought, well, how do you actually broadcast online? And this is where things started to pivot for me. As you know now, I have a radio software company called Radio.co. I've been heavily involved with podcasting as well now, podcast.co and Matchmaker.fm. These are all products that are sort of centric around audio. So that theme has stuck with me throughout my journey as an entrepreneur over the past sort of 15 or 16 years. But yeah, I was at a stage where I thought, right, audio is good. There's not that much competition. Certainly back then it was kind of pretty primitive. Like the idea of being able to broadcast something online was really technical, and it was only kind of reserved for people who were incredibly clever and had sort of technical expertise. So I didn't really have that expertise. So what I needed to do then was find a partner. So I went out and I looked for someone who had the knowledge it took to set these servers up and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of ended up learning that stuff later on anyway. So I was like learning on the job. Again, that's a good thing to do as an entrepreneur. You've got to adopt the mindset. This goes back to having that mindset that you're going to move things forward. But ultimately, there's a saying, I think it's Richard Branson who quoted saying something like, if you can't do something, say that you could do it and then figure it out later. And that's kind of literally how I got started. So I think to sort of wrap up the mindset thing, You know, it doesn't matter what age you're at. I was real lucky, I think. I started really young. You know, you're full of energy, you're full of like, I suppose you don't have that sort of fear of failure that you do perhaps once you're more established in life. You know, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, you haven't got any outgoings. So failing is kind of like, oh, if I fail, it doesn't matter, I'll just try something else. But I think, you know, that can be useful. If you're watching this and you're a bit younger, maybe you're like, you know, between say 16 and 25, that's a perfect time to start a business, in my opinion. If you're perhaps at a later stage of your career and you're sick of your job, you want to try and do something different, I think you need to just get into the mindset of having that drive and that determination and a genuine want to succeed. So that's mindset. That's kind of how I've approached mindset. I think you've got to, number one, set yourself a goal, an ambition that you want to generate money. You want to make money. You want to go out there and prosper, okay? Number two, you've got to have a determination to say to yourself, I'm going to do everything it dang takes to get to that position. And I think you've got to have a genuine want to succeed. So if you've got any doubts or if you've got any second guessing yourself, that's always going to hold you back, unfortunately. So I'm not kind of like a mindset guru, but you've got to try and overcome those yourself or find someone who can help you overcome those mental barriers before you'll ever have a chance of succeeding. So really, really important to get your mindset right from the get-go. Okay, so second pillar or strategy when it comes to becoming a millionaire is income, right? You need an income in order to generate money that you're going to save to buy assets to become a millionaire, right? Without an income that's sufficient, you're going to struggle. It doesn't have to mean that you have to quit your job tomorrow. If that's where you are, if you're in employment and you want to increase your income, you can actually have a side hustle. Now, there's lots of millionaires that I know that actually started out doing something almost as a passion project. So they weren't getting paid to do it. And the great thing about these kinds of businesses is if you're doing something that you love because you just do it because you love and you're not bothered about getting paid, well, if you can get paid, that's a bonus. And you'll work naturally harder at it because you're enjoying that process. There's no point of going into a business, I don't think, where your heart is not in it. I think you've got to be excited about the project to see it through. You know, interestingly, when I first started out, and I mentioned before, I was like 16, 17 years old, and I didn't want to make $1 million back then. That wasn't even part of my mentality. I didn't think that was even achievable. I remember setting a goal to begin with. I just wanted to get to like a £1,000 in my bank. And that was when I was like, I just finished school and I started college. It was before I went to university. You know, as I mentioned before, lots of my friends were going out, like getting part-time jobs. So I was like, if I could just get to £1,000 in the bank, then I'll be happy, you know, because that's like load to a 17-year-old kid. 1,000 is like, I don't know what it's like now, but back then 1,000 was like, you know, you were super rich if you had £1,000. So I just wanted to get to that £1,000 in my bank. By 17, I'd probably achieve this. And by the time I was 18, I was probably making 3 times that per month, because once I got to 1,000, I was like, okay, how do we increase this? I don't want to be making I don't want to just get to £1,000 in my bank. I want to be making £1,000 every month. And then I got to £1,000 every month. And I was like, okay, let's get to £3,000. Let's get to £5,000, and so on and so forth. You've got to always be kind of climbing that ladder. And I think it's easy just to begin with to say, oh, I want to make £1 million or I want to make $1 million. But you think about it like this, you've got to climb, there's got to be a gradual incline before you can reach that top point, okay? So even if you're not making as much money as you want to begin with, perhaps you're watching this video, you've launched a business, it's not doing that well, or it's not doing as well as you would like it to, there's always an opportunity to increase that number. So you've always got to be slowly trying to grow. You've got to start at the bottom of the mountain before you can climb up to the top, is basically what I'm trying to say here. It's pretty straightforward. But ultimately, you need an income. Now, if your job is, you know, if you're in a position where perhaps you're in employment, you know, I remember reading a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is amazing. You know, I read that when I was probably like 21 years old. And by then I was really well on my way to doing pretty well. But it was interesting to sort of read, because they were sort of explaining how, like, look, if you've got a job, you don't have to go and quit your job and start a business. You could kind of start a business alongside your current job, which will start increasing your revenue. Doing something in the evenings, at the weekends. And as I mentioned, if you're doing something like a passion project, you know, I've got a friend who's an artist, and he started out really just like as a kind of something to do. He's now making quite substantial amounts of money alongside his main job by doing bespoke art for people, you know, commissions for big companies and commissions for individuals. And, you know, he gets paid probably almost as much now from his art stuff than he does from his main job, which is really interesting. But you know, he does that because he loves to do it as well as for the financial gain. Okay, so before we continue, I wanted to show you a real quick exercise. This is good fun, and I learnt this about 10 years ago. When I was in my early 20s, a guy called Frank Kern taught me this, and you know, it's been a real help for me in terms of, you think about £1 million or $1 million and it's like this huge number. How can you ever achieve that? So if you look at it like this, £1 million in yearly revenue equates to 83,333 recurring each month. So in order to make this amount of money, we need to be generating around £2,777 per day. There's a lot of like recursive numbers going on here, which you'll see. So immediately we're sort of starting to sound a little bit more achievable, because if you look at like $1 million, it's just this big number with lots of zeros and you're like, how am I ever going to get to that? You look at 83 grand a month, and sure, it's still a lot of money. It still sounds like it's almost unachievable. But when you start thinking, okay, 2 grand, 2.5 grand per day, it suddenly almost feels like a little bit more within your reach. So let's say I'm selling a product for $100. This exercise is great because you can do this with any value product. Well, it doesn't matter if you're selling something for $100, $10, $200, $1,000. It's all the same math. And this is why I'm doing it on the computer, because as I say, doing math on camera is never a good idea. So suddenly we divide 2,777 by 100 and we get 27. This simply means that we need to sell 27 of whatever it is we're selling for $100 a day to make $1 million a year. Now, if we're doing this online, 24 hours in a day, that's 1.125 things per hour. Now, bear in mind, you can sell stuff via Google Ads, you can sell stuff on Facebook, Instagram. There's loads of ways to get routes into your website now. And as long as you can generate between, say, 20 and 30 sales a day, you'll be well on your way to making $1 million, which I think is really exciting. You know, if we apply the same mathematical formula with a $30 product, we'd need to sell around 4 an hour. So I really hope you find that little exercise useful. It has helped me tremendously when it comes to my businesses and figuring out how we can scale our pricing and how we can really generate enough revenue to grow. And this exercise, I still do this all the time to this day. It's certainly been great for me for 10 years. And I think also it just makes things seem so much more achievable. So if you could say, start doing so many sales every single day, you might be like 15 sales and you need to get to 30. Well, you know you're halfway there. And that's always really, really encouraging. So it's a good idea to have a firm strategy or a firm plan in your head of how many it is of whatever it is you're selling you need to sell to get to 100,000 or to get to 1 million or whatever your ambition is. Go out there, start calculating it, breaking it down into how many things you need to sell per day, per month, whatever it might be. I found this exercise massively useful, so I thought you might as well. So there is a saying that I absolutely love, which is, no one gets rich by writing checks. Who writes checks these days anyway, okay? But the third, and I'd say one of the most important pillars behind kind of making your first million is savings. Basically, this is kind of partially true. So you don't get rich by writing checks. However, you have to sometimes, invest your income to grow further. So from the get-go, I would suggest you need to have a savings strategy in place. It's not possible to accumulate wealth or really grow your assets without having some kind of savings. So if you start making money, you've got to try and save. It doesn't matter how much money you're making, you've got to make sure that you're putting money away every single month, and that strictly does not get touched. The amount of people that I see who still don't have any savings, at my age, I'm in my early 30s, but even people who are in like their 40s, their 50s, it is astonishing. There are so many people out there who do not have a single penny of savings. They live at the sort of, what they earn every month. They live at the bottom of the bank balance. They kind of constantly go in and out of their overdraft, but what they earn, they are spending. It is impossible to generate any kind of serious wealth if you're doing this, if you're spending what you earn every single month. So ultimately, savings is one of the most important points to this lesson, to this talk that we're doing today. I think really the best way to do it is you need to have a strategy. You need to decide, what are your outgoings. You need to be specific about it. Every single millionaire that I know has a real firm grasp on their financial affairs. You know, they can probably tell you sometimes the nearest pound how much they've got in the bank, you know, what their investments are worth. You know, if prices of property have gone up, what's their house worth? You know, do you know, for example, if you've got a house, what is it worth? Have you got an idea of the market since, you know, if it's grown since you bought it? So it's really, really important that you have not only a saving strategy in place, but really firm understanding of your finances. Avoid bad debt, okay? When I say bad debt, I mean buying stuff on store cards. I mean, you know, paying for shit on your credit card that really you can't afford. You've got to try and have some self-discipline. And of course, when you start making money, the temptation is to go out and buy yourself some shiny new things, right? Everyone likes the shiny stuff, but ultimately you've got to still make sure that you're not spending all of your profits on shiny stuff. Some of those profits need to be reserved to then go on and invest elsewhere or acquire assets. I've always tried throughout my kind of journey as an entrepreneur to sort of, it's a very simple rule, but I try and save 50% and spend 50%. So if I make, you know, let's say a token amount. Let's say I've made £10,000 profit. Well, £5,000 of that profit will be reinvested, and £5,000 of that profit will be money that is free to be spent. You know, and it varies over time. There's probably been periods where I have saved a lot more than this and more than 50%. So like sometimes I'll be saving 75% of profits, and there's other times where I've decided I need to reinvest in a business and take a hit on the level of profit that my business is making for that year in order to fund other things. So it might be taking on new staff or buying new equipment or whatever. It's not always just going to be like a sort of straight line, but ultimately you need to make sure that you are saving money each and every month, either as an individual or in your company, or ideally, which is what I do, both, okay? It's good to have your own personal assets, and it's good to have some assets in your company as well. Some people advise you to not make any profit in your company, take everything out. Now, I've been always a firm believer that, you know, it's good to have a contingency fund in your business, and also it's good to reinvest in your business and help grow it too. So I kind of generally advise against saying like stripping out every single penny of profit that you make in your company. All right, so finally, how to make your first million. The next step, we've covered off mindset, we've talked about generating income and how important income is. We've talked about savings, the fact that you need to start saving. The next topic is acquiring and creating assets. Now, what is an asset? An asset is simply something that you own, which can be a tangible thing like property or gold, or it could be intangible thing like a business, which I suppose is still kind of tangible. Or I suppose like Bitcoin, I suppose you might call Bitcoin intangible. I'm not an investment expert, by the way, so as a disclaimer here, none of this should be taken as advice. I really don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm surprised if you made it this far, congratulations. But you need to start acquiring assets, okay? Now, I am a big firm believer of having a balanced portfolio of investments. So my portfolio consists of property. I have 4 properties now, about to buy a 5th. I have some investments in stocks and shares portfolios. So I actually work generally with financial advisors and wealth managers who will manage my portfolios. And I've got these both in my companies and also as an individual as well, both with properties and the investments. More recently, you know, I've been doing some individual investments into companies. So I've done a bit of angel investing. A couple of my angel investments have failed, so I've lost a lot of money there. But a couple seem to be doing pretty well, and I've got some high hopes for one of them, which is going to deliver a huge return on my initial investment, which was probably about 3 years ago now. To top that off, I've also kind of got some investments in things like Bitcoin, which I'm not big on. I must admit, I don't recommend putting all of your money into Bitcoin. For me, it was something that I wanted to try. And obviously, actually, recently, this was probably like 3 years ago, I managed to invest in Bitcoin when like 3 years ago, when the curve was just kind of rising, but it hadn't hit its peak. And then obviously it crashed and it's just risen dramatically again. Interestingly, I had a friend who put a substantial amount of money into Bitcoin, like $50,000 plus, and he was hoping that it was going to do really, really well, but I think he invested too late in the day. He stripped that money back out of Bitcoin. Interestingly, if he'd have left it in there for like the last 3 years, he'd have probably now quadrupled his money. Here's the thing with investing, you know, sometimes you have to be prepared to take a hit or see a dip in your income. And sometimes it's about perseverance. You've got to play the long game when it comes to investing and buying assets. In terms of building a business, I think there's a whole nother video in that. Obviously your business is always going to generate probably the most revenue for you, but it's just about how you then use that revenue and leverage that revenue, and also leverage debt as well. You've got to bear in mind that I've got mortgages, I've got business loans, so you've got to have a balance between assets that you own and money in the bank, and also being able to leverage good debt. And the difference between good debt and bad debt: good debt means effectively you're generating a return on that debt. Okay, so you're leveraging that debt to build your wealth, to build your capital assets. Bad debt is basically debt that you have to pay back. Like I say, it's kind of credit card bills, store cards, that sort of stuff. It's debt that really just is not going to do you any favors. You're not leveraging against anything. You're just spending pointlessly on items that perhaps you can't actually afford, and you're paying them off over a very long period of time at a very high interest rate. Good debt is when you buy something, you're creating an asset, you're using that money to generate further revenue. So yeah, again, there's a sort of almost like another lesson in that, but I think that's my approach to generating assets. Okay, so to finish up, I wanted to summarize what we've just talked about. If you found this video useful, by the way, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and also remember to subscribe to this channel for more videos just like this one. You know the deal. Number one, we've first talked about adopting the right mindset, making sure that you are convinced and determined to get where you want to go. That is so important. You've got to have motivation and drive to achieve success, I believe. Next up, income. If your income is not enough to cover your living costs, then you need to figure out how to generate an additional stream of revenue. That could be a side hustle, could be a passion project. We talked about increasing your income. There is different ways that you can go out there and make more money. A lot of it just is down to hard work. Sometimes you might end up working evenings and weekends. Jesus, when I first started out, I would literally be working until like 11 o'clock every single night. Sometimes you have to put the hours in the early days especially, to achieve what you want to get. Savings. You don't get rich without writing checks, right? So it's important to always be saving money and making sure that when you're saving money, you're building up little pockets of money that then you can go and invest in other things. Which brings me on nicely to our final topic, which is acquiring and creating assets. It doesn't matter if you're buying property, investing in something like Bitcoin or gold, or traditionally, investing in stocks and shares, making sure that you're using your money to create further income is really the name of the game here. Or having assets that are self-sustaining and pay for themselves over a period of time, which is quite a lot of the time what properties are doing. So to summarize, that's exactly how I think you can make your first million if you follow those steps. And of course, there is no magic formula, right? I said at the beginning, this isn't get rich quick or one of these stupid schemes. This is just my advice and really how I've kind of experienced this along my own journey, some of the steps that I've taken. So if you found that useful, I'd appreciate a comment. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions for me, also feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll speak to you soon. Take it easy. Bye for now. Hey, before you go, let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm always posting interesting content like this over on my LinkedIn channel, and it'd be cool to hang out. So go to jamesm.com/connect, click on LinkedIn, send me a connection request. And once we're connected, send me a message, say you came over from this video, and I'll send you some cool things for free. Sound fair? Well, head to jamesm.com/connect and connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll see you over there.